here we are with Avery Ching, the co-founder of Aptos, a really interesting up-and-coming layer one chain. So Aptos has, like I said, has been kind of breaking out this cycle. Super interesting chain founded by former employees of Meta's blockchain team, backed by many prominent VCs. So really excited to learn more about you today, Avery. So to start, maybe we can, just get into Aptos. How there's many different layer one chains. How is Aptos special?
Appreciate this opportunity to be here with you, Camilla. Aptos, I think a lot of it, what makes us Aptos really different, I think comes with its founding history. And so I'll kind of walk through that. So I was at Meta for 10 years, working on a variety of different things in data infrastructure. And in 2018, there was an effort to build out a network that could support remittances, payments, and some largest use cases in the world with distribution from Meta. And it was the project was called Libra, and over time kind of evolved to include things like Novi and Diem. Diem being an association of partners that could build out a top-tier technology stack that could support their ambitions. I joined the team pretty early on in 2018, started working in the consensus space, and then overall became the Web3 blockchain lead for Meta. And during that experience, I think what really resonated a lot with our team was very philosophical. It was, I had worked in data infrastructure for a long time, solved a lot of challenges in terms of how do we process massive amounts of data, extract lots of insights, and use it to power products, that have billion plus audiences. With that knowledge, I think this is a very unique opportunity where we can change the way the internet looks and runs, where everyone can have access to it, everyone can own a piece of it, everyone can participate as much as they like into it. And so this mission of building out a public utility, I think, stuck with a lot of us as the core mission of what our technology was designed to do. As a part of that, it was really like, how do we reach billions of people? That's our MO at Meta was, we definitely want a lot of scale, and there's a lot of benefits from that type of scale of economy. And so when you think about how do you kind of reach that level of scale, it comes down to what are the systems you're building underneath it? What is the blockchain technology? What is the way we think about also the developer experience of constructing applications in a way that is very, very different than the way you think about coding today? Most people think about coding as, I develop something, I test something out, it has some bugs, I fix it, I roll those fixes forward. And that's the kind of traditional developer cycle. When it comes to smart contract development, that doesn't work. We can't have bugs there. We can't have funds or assets being lost. And in order for people to be able to trust that this is a reliable infrastructure, we decided to kind of start from the grounds up in that mission. And so with that, a couple of key technologies were built out. One was the Diem blockchain, and the other one, the Move language. The Move language is a very different way of thinking about writing smart contract development. It is a way that is designed to make sure that people can actually own their assets, that they're not stuck in a contract that kind of has a map of ownership, and those assets are unreachable. It prevents simple programmer mistakes through today preventing dynamic dispatch, but over time things that we can actually enable in the future. It also prevents the way you think about things is more around, you just can't make certain types of mistakes. You have a coin module, and that coin module is unable to accidentally just drop money on the floor or forget about it or multiply or increase that supply without going through proper functions and constraints that make sure, and permissions to ensure kind of you don't make those mistakes as a programmer. And so it's fundamentally thinking about how do you get from ideation into production, not only just quickly, but also safely as possible, and that being a game changer in the way that developers can bring their ideas to life in a new network was one key difference. Another key difference is the infrastructure. We looked at things like Ethereum and Tendermint and others, very promising, but we didn't feel it was designed for scale. And so with that, we had to redesign the way we think about how does scale look like in this space. And so drawing back on my knowledge of system design, I also, before this, I worked on high-performance computing, supercomputing at places like Argonne, Sandia, and and Los Alamos as well. And those systems are designed to have massive parallelism, to support the largest applications of the world around protein folding and other very hard scientific challenges. And you think about the way you design a system, it should be supporting high levels of parallelism. It should be highly concurrent. It should make sure that programming model is integrated very carefully into the system so it can support those key innovations. And at the end of the day, it looks like a decentralized database to most people. It is just very fast, highly performant, very low latency. And so you can build on top of it the kind of internet applications you see today, except for they're based on Web3. They are owned by the users. They are a permissionless database that everyone can interact and agree on settlement on. And so those two things, I think, are the key kind of pieces that we started off in 2018 with. I think another key differentiator is upgradability. And the ability for the system to be able to change very rapidly over time through technology advances is super important because this space is moving very, very quickly. And so being able to design that system where we said, look, we have a mechanism for being able to change your consensus protocol as a part of a governance update that's voted for on-chain. The ability for us to evolve the way accounts are looked at over time and support account abstraction natively, or the way that we are able to kind of scale out in many different ways, from leveraging more resources on a single machine to also going across multiple machines over time as a way to kind of scale up and scale down the same way you think about cloud infrastructure. Also very, very key. And also add new features like on-chain randomness, which is very interesting and maybe one of the best important use cases of blockchain today. So it's a combination of starting off from how do we support billions of users from a systems perspective and from a language, a smart contracts development perspective, to how do we also iterate really quickly with technology over time. And the last piece I would say is providing that user experience that looks exactly like the internet, so we can support those 5 billion internet users today, while there's only maybe tens of millions of kind of Web3 users, and growing that that audience into the larger internet audience. Internet audience is very key for us. So those are the kind of key differentiators, I think, from the Aptos perspective, from a philosophy standpoint. From a practicality standpoint, what we've also shown is that Aptos has the highest performance out there in terms of scalability. We do things differently in terms of transparency. There's a lot of noise in the space. Okay, we're the fastest, we're the most scalable, so on and so forth. These experiments are often not repeatable. They're not end to end. And so what we've done is taken a very different approach. Like from our history, we look at things like there are lots of database benchmarks out there, and there's a way to kind of measure these databases against each other through TPC, for example, which is a benchmarking suite. We don't have that in blockchain today. So we started to build out those processes. We started to put together those infrastructures and the frameworks for us to say, like, here's our framework for evaluation. Here's our experimental setup. Here's the machine configurations. Anyone can run those experiments, have verifiable and repeatable results. And what we were to demonstrate was we could get more than 2 billion transactions per day in a mainnet-like environment that 70 plus node operators witnessed and verified, which is more than 14 times what Visa can do. And that's instant settlement, unlike where in Visa where it kind of settles and then kind of settles again over time. So I think, those are kind of the things that we think really separate us from other infrastructures out there.
Super interesting. Okay, so a big piece, like you mentioned, is the programming language Move, which was developed in Meta first, then upgradability, this very scalable infrastructure, this Web 2-like UX, and being able to test this transparently with a system that others can also try. That's a really interesting piece as well. Is that available right now?
Absolutely. Yeah. So if they, we published a Medium post about it. We posted on Twitter. People are welcome to go ahead and take a look at the open source code that we provided, rerun the same experiments, use the same hardware on GCP. And they should get the same results, if not better today, because the system's actually improved over time.
So digging a bit into the infrastructure piece, like this scalable infrastructure, how do you actually achieve these? Was it 2 billion transactions a day?
In a day, yeah. So that's more than 25,000 transactions per second, yeah.
Okay. Because, there's this very well-known blockchain Trilemma where, you have to make trade-offs in security, decentralization, and scalability. So where's the trade-off in Aptos? Like, is all the scalability coming at the expense of decentralization or of security?
It's a great question. I actually put out a very long post on Twitter about the blockchain trilemma. And I don't think of it as so much of a trilemma as more of like a stool in some sense. Like, these are the legs in which every piece of infrastructure in the Web3 space needs to build on top of. We need to be more secure. We need to have better performance. We also need to be, more decentralized over time. And so it isn't necessarily so much trade-offs today as pushing these directions forward and kind of making the stool stronger. So let me give you an example of that. For decentralization, it's there's many different ways to think about decentralization. The way we really focus on it is going to be around things like Nakamoto coefficient, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but that's the number of nodes in which kind of you lose security of the network if you kind of those nodes become malicious over time. We also have another metric that's not so well known that we care about, which is called the liveness coefficient, which is it's similar to Nakamoto coefficient, but the number of nodes in which it takes to kind of make sure transactions are being appended to the end of the blockchain. And so a lot of people think about, you have 10,000 nodes or 100,000 nodes, whatever connected to your network, that makes it more decentralized. But in fact, many of these protocols have a very low Nakamoto coefficient, and those extra nodes don't really help with security. They just increase cost, they increase coordination, make it very difficult, and they are kind of dust in the system. Maybe like this comes to kind of a vanity metrics to some degree, it's something that we try to focus on what's real, and I think that's kind of where we think about from a node standpoint, decentralization. Like, these two metrics are the key ones out there. But there's other aspects of decentralization that are also really important, such as how do you do development? Aptos has been open source code even since its earlier days as DM, and back in 2018 under the Apache 2 license. Anyone can contribute, anyone can take the code and fork and do whatever they want to do. And in fact, we saw that, which was really cool. Like, back in the day, some developers did take our code, fork it, and kind of launch a network, which is really neat. And that's the kind of way we think about the ethos of Web3 being very helpful for others and supporting an industry, not just a specific project over time. And so it is that, in the sense of open source, also community aspects. We have an AIP process, or Aptos Improvement Proposal process, where anyone can kind of contribute different ideas and also implementations to the code base over time. And then kind of also, like, how do you think about governance? So governance in Aptos is a bit unique. It uses on-chain voting. Any token holder, staking token holder, can vote on different proposals. And the other thing that's really interesting about Aptos is that once you make those votes, those changes can go live immediately through the programming nature of the protocol. So it's a very, very decentralized process around governance. And so it's a governance, decentralization is a very, very big topic, and it's not just about nodes. It is not just about, your processes. It's really encompassing like your whole philosophy around how you're involving others and how you're involving a community in the way you develop software and make sure changes go out with community kind of approval. The other aspects of security and scalability, I'd say, security is also very related to decentralization, right? If you have very few nodes in the network, a very low Nakamoto coefficient, they can be compromised. And we've actually seen nodes that have been compromised because of that aspect of security. And for this, things like Move just move the bar forward. There's no trade-off with respect to Move, except for maybe there's a smaller ecosystem that's not aware of it, but that will change over time as people kind of get familiar with like what's possible as opposed to having to live with what exists today. And also security aspect is around processes. So how do you think about this way you develop software? Do you have one code reviewer, two code reviewers? Do you have a lot of testing that goes into dev nets, test nets, main nets? Also, does it test on every code commit? Is it nightly? All these kind of things around security, they aren't trade-offs. I mean, they're trade-offs in terms of cost, perhaps, but not trade-offs in terms of the other aspects. And so that's where, we see that, things like Aptos that have that enterprise-grade security that you would expect have a differentiating play in the market as well. And the last aspect around performance, this is just around mostly technology to us. How do you build amazingly scalable software that can leverage all the resources of your machine and beyond that to providing a really, really great, highly scalable system with a great user experience?
Okay, so but specifically to the Aptos chain, like how is it built? Like how is it a proof of stake chain? How many nodes that does it have? I know you say, I mean, that's not the only thing that's relevant, but still, like
let's talk about those. So Aptos is a proof of stake based network. It uses a Byzantine fault tolerant protocol. And it is actually really cool. There's a paper called Shoal, which describes our latest and greatest in consensus, and I definitely encourage the viewers to read it. We've iterated our consensus protocol, I think, 4 or 5 times already since 2018. And we kind of bring new improvements across the way, whether it's latency and or scalability through that. So that's something that we're really excited about. In terms of the other aspects of node count, I think we're about 126 nodes today. I think the Nakamoto coefficient is 18, which is actually quite good. I think that's the highest Nakamoto coefficient of any node network that's launched since our launch time. So we're really happy about that, and we'll see. I think we'll see more decentralization in that aspect coming over time. But that's pretty impressive for a network that's been live just about 2 years from now.
Nice. Can anyone become a node?
Yes, anyone can run a node. There are some minimum requirements in terms of staking, but it's a permissionless system. Yeah.
Okay. There other layer 1 chains are criticized because it takes a lot of resources to run a node. Is that something that your participants on the Aptos chains would struggle with?
That is a good question. So I think this is one area where there is a bit of a trade-off, right? So if you want to have a high performance and low latency network, especially low latency, I think that's where you have to have a great internet connection, for example. You have to have a scalable validator infrastructure, like one that has decent amount of compute power. And this is kind of with respect to the needs of the network. And so this is something that, in order to get those great results, we did have to get, pretty reasonably mid-tier powerful machines to get the 2 billion transactions in a single day and 25,000 transactions per second. So yeah, a bit of a trade-off there. But we think a trade-off worthwhile to make for a customer experience being really good.
Cool. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so there's another chain that's also founded by former Meta employees, Sui. They also use the Move language. So curious about Aptos versus Sui. I know you probably don't want to be thought of in those terms, but it's still interesting to me. They just look very similar in the surface. So how should I be thinking about them? Is there a different focus that you guys have, or are you built differently?
Yeah, great question. So I think what people are kind of not aware of is, Move is more of a community aspect and not so much of a, we're all sharing exactly the same code base, and that's good. Like, that's healthy. Mm-hmm. I'd say what we've seen that's really resonated well with us is that the version of Move that Aptos uses is also being used by a number of other projects in the ecosystem. And, a lot of community members have been helping us to develop this over time, and something that we're really excited about. I'd say in terms of the system design, we are not just different than Sui in this aspect, but we're different on all other networks. The way we do parallel processing is using a form of what we call dynamic parallelism. Other systems use static parallelism, and so that requires you kind of declare upfront what data you're touching as a kind of requirement to the way they schedule. Aptos is very different in the sense that it analyzes at runtime what the dependencies are and then kind of extracts as much parallelism as possible. And this is something where DeFi, you get a huge benefit from dynamic parallelism. And the reason why is because you have a situation where, say, you have this tree of orders you need to kind of traverse through and kind of match, with the matching engine. And the ability for dynamic parallelism to be able to do the runtime matching, as opposed to declaring up front, I might touch these objects, but I don't know, allows you to extract much higher performance than any other network out there. And so we've been really excited about what BlockSTM can do in this space and augmenting the capabilities of BlockSTM with other things like hints over time.
If you haven't already considered building your next smart contract in Rust, you gotta have a look at Sorabon. You can migrate your existing Solidity smart contracts over to Sorabon, and we'll show you how. You can also get funding for your projects. There's a $100 million adoption fund just to drive the adoption of Sorabon, so you can help build the ecosystem and potentially qualify for grant awards up to $150,000. You can visit us now at sorabon.stellar.org to learn more.
Interesting. Okay, so the main difference is that you use dynamic parallelism, and as I understand it, it's having nodes run different sets of data, like different functions at the same time.
Yeah.
Is
So
that broadly what
yeah,
it is?
it's definitely it's definitely a low level optimization, I would say. But the way that you define kind of what data you're touching in the system is different in Aptos and every other system out there, pretty much. And that way we do it just allows for much higher concurrency, and especially comes out to be a huge benefit for DeFi applications. We also have other things that I think other networks do not have, such as secure on-chain randomness. And this is a really neat feature where we have a hackathon actually running right now for exploring this feature. And there's some use cases in terms of gaming, enterprise use cases. You can think about when you open up a loot box, how can it be truly random? If you have a casino, how can those the slot machine be truly random, or playing poker or card games? These things as well. So this ability for the blockchain itself. So if you think about a proof of stake blockchain, guarantees that the security, the safety and liveness of that blockchain is going to be, for sure there, as long as more than 2/3 of your stake is secured. And the same thing for us is true for the randomness aspect. And this allows you to build out things you can't just do anywhere else. So having that ability for on-chain randomness that is unique, the ability for us to support dynamic parallelism, which is unique to Aptos, and also having the fastest consensus protocol out there through what we've been doing so far with our current version of Aptos BFT, plus what Shoal is going to bring in the future, also just provides that massive throughput that we talked about that no one else can match in the industry. So those are kind of our differentiators versus kind of other networks, not just say Sui.
Very cool. Okay, and then something else that you guys have that most don't have is just the incredible amount of funding and the big names behind you. So I believe that you raised over 350 million from A16Z, Jump, Multicoin Capital, and others. And so, it's why some call Aptos and other chains that are backed by big VCs, VC chains. It's a bit of a despective kind of term, but I want to get your thoughts on this, on the term and kind of the criticism behind it, which is you have all these VCs holding your tokens. Maybe that'll make the chain less decentralized because there will be just a concentrated voting power in the chain's investors, and then two, there's this concern that as soon as the unlock period comes, there will be a huge selling pressure, and the investors who got tokens for a lot cheaper than retail will, they'll be able to sell those tokens for a profit for the retail investors. What's your take on this? You think, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've been really happy with the folks who have been supporting us from the very early days. And a lot of the support also kind of comes from the fact that we worked closely with a lot of other teams when it came to building out the DM network. And then, being the technology at the time, like everybody was very happy with it. It was going to be the right technology to take that whole project forward. And so I think it's pretty natural that a lot of those folks would want to continue to be involved with that project. And so we've been really happy with the team that's going to come forward with us, as well as all the new folks that also joined and been excited about the Aptos vision. I will say, with respect to the tokenomics, the investor portion is definitely smaller than almost any network I've seen. I think it's 13.48%. And if you compare that to other networks, it is probably one of the lowest, if not the lowest, proportion of tokens allocated towards that pool of folks. And so, I think that is also like a huge, vote of confidence from those folks and understand that this is a decentralized technology. It's meant for everybody. It's something that should be owned by the users and the developers who build on top of it. And so really, really excited about the way that the token supply was allocated for sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think I read, is it 51% of tokens go to community?
That's right. Yeah. I think that's really important to again show, like what's the value of, where are the values of the network? It's really towards being community driven, community owned, and having those folks, building amazing products on top of Aptos.
And so speaking of the community portion, of course, like it seems the hardest thing right now in this cycle, at least, is like points, airdrops, rewards. Are you planning any of those like incentive programs where you might be giving away like the community part of your token pool?
Yeah, I can't comment on that. Unfortunately, the Aptos Foundation is responsible for the token allocation for those community tokens. But from what I do know, I mean, I do see them very, very active in terms of helping to find lots of projects to support. They built out the largest movie ecosystem out there, as measured by the Electric Capital Developer Report. I think more like around twice that of the next largest movie ecosystem. And so, building an ecosystem is something that is fun, and it also requires a lot of support from different entities like the foundation, also from Aptos Labs in terms of being able to support from a developer standpoint, and also new developers that are coming in and building amazing things. And so we've seen folks like Beware Labs put out staking protocols, delegated staking protocol support. We've seen other initiatives from projects even in DeFi, adding new libraries to the Aptos infrastructure. And so just seeing kind of community building across the board is really what this network's all about. And we're super excited about the progress we've made.
Cool. So if you can go over like the structure of the Aptos ecosystem, is it, is it the labs is a company that builds applications for the chain? Then there's a foundation that like funds, I don't know, the startups, or like how does it work?
Yeah, great question. So Aptos Labs is a developer that builds different things, especially supporting the protocol these days, as well as building some infrastructure. We build Petra as a wallet. We build Aptos naming service. We have an Explorer. We also build out a lot of smart contract support for different kinds of ecosystem projects as well. And just, our job is to also help with helping the ecosystem get started. But the foundation is really responsible for the token allocations, also growing out the ecosystem more formally. That's their mandate, making sure that the network is secure, decentralized. And then you have a lot of different players in the space in different verticals like gaming, social, finance, and others. And so those communities have taken on a life of their own, and you can walk through each community. They're very, very interesting and exciting. I know this is the Defiant, so we definitely want to talk about DeFi for sure. Mm-hmm. But we definitely see a lot of community building, which is really exciting. And Labs is just one of many developers in this space.
Got it. If we could go over some of the main use cases that you're seeing grow right now, like how is Aptos being used the most?
So I think definitely, since we can talk about DeFi, what we love about DeFi is that there's kind of maybe generation one of DeFi in some sense, like a lot of the older DeFi protocols. What we found that folks can do with Aptos and DeFi specifically is really, really neat. And we think it's the next generation of what DeFi is going to do and support. And we kind of walk back a little bit. What's the mission of DeFi? The DeFi mission is, how do you construct a bunch of open protocols in which people can kind of compose them together and make unique experiences that wouldn't be possible in today's institutions? And so when we see things like, Ondo Protocol actually just announced that they're launching USDY on top of Aptos natively. And a company like Thala Labs is going to integrate that into their protocol on right away, essentially, and mm-hmm. seeing that other integration happening into other protocols, so you can support borrow lend, trading swaps with those assets, and kind of even then build out aggregators and other kind of larger applications across those. That's where you start to see like that kind of real innovation. And when you work it at very, very quick finality times, like sub-second times, as well as that high throughput and support, massive parallelism when it comes to clubs and other order books. That produces a very, very vibrant ecosystem. And so we're super happy to have builders like Iconia building out clubs. We have Thala Labs building out different kinds of AMM-based pools, as well as having their own token, and then also great borrow-lend protocols. And then it's not just two or three different protocols. There's so many different protocols that are built on top of Aptos. Merkle Trade, as well as another DEX, and so that kind of ecosystem has been really taking off, and it's also the mindset of that and philosophy of those folks. They're not thinking about zero-sum games. They're really thinking about how does the community of DeFi and Aptos kind of grow together and grow the pie, and seeing that kind of collaboration is really inspiring, I think, for me as someone who kind of looks as a builder as well.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that, the ability to do things in Aptos that are hard to do on other chains. I think that's really exciting. Like, can you, what sort of applications are you envisioning?
Absolutely. So I think one thing is, like, take DeFi again. We've seen so many hacks around DeFi, and people losing lots of funds, right? There's a lot of risk there. One thing that Aptos has done is in our what we call like the framework, which is kind of the base layer that people can build on top of, around our accounts, around the way we think about different kind of basic primitives, data structures, and all that. We have something called the Move Prover, and the Move Prover allows us to formally verify security properties of that infrastructure. And so it provides another strong layer of support for security on top of all applications, but especially on top of DeFi. We can take that same Move Prover and now take that application code and then also grant new security properties on top of the application code. And so you can have this secure layer, build a secure layer and secure layer for DeFi, which allows you to kind of build a lot more confidence in terms of, this is infrastructure that is much more safe, much more resilient than by default out of the box, because it's kind of forced to be that way, as opposed to other ecosystems. And so that's something that really gets us excited about as a differentiator for safety in terms of DeFi. And I think one thing I also talked about was the way Iconia works, having these order books and these matching engines that can extract much, much higher levels of concurrency and parallelism than anywhere else can do. That's also, we think, enabling new sets of use cases and new users and new opportunities for people to build out a very high performance club, for example. And now, when you pair that with other kinds of assets or other kinds of interactions and composability, I think it just produces a really virtuous cycle of innovation in not just DeFi, but even open finance. So when you think about Ondo being a real world asset being deployed on top of Aptos, combining this kind of TradFi as well as the DeFi world together in a way that can be composed and take advantage of the unique properties of Aptos, we think will be very life-changing in the future.
So you mentioned the uniqueness of the order books that people can build on Aptos. What's different about them?
I think it mostly comes down to the way that they're implemented. And so it's not necessarily, the functionality difference comes from, again, if we can extract massive parallelism of these order books, they can support lots and lots of trades. They can support trades at low fees because they're not sequentialized. And they can kind of support, ideally, the one of the big advantages of having more liquidity and assets in a single place allows for just unlocking new opportunities, as opposed to kind of fractionalizing those across other opportunities because you can't perform fast enough in a single order book. And so that's something that is also really, really nice as a result of that.
Okay, so maybe getting centralized exchange kind of performance on a decentralized exchange.
Exactly, and getting very, very close to it, if not those levels, right? So I think those kind of that's something that's the holy grail, which is how do we kind of match or maybe over time exceed what a centralized exchange can do. Will be definitely a top line goal for us.
Nice. Is there any specific use case in kind of Aptos Labs or the Aptos Foundation roadmap that you'd like the chain to be excelling at, or that you'd like to be the focus on? Yeah,
I think this is one where we've been thinking about AI a lot, and I know that's definitely a hot topic with things like Sora coming out kind of very recently. It just kind of not exacerbates, but it brings that problem of content verification lineage to be moved more front and center in terms of what blockchain can do. Because there's kind of two aspects here. One is how does AI help blockchain? And I think we've actually done a lot of work in that space where we built something called Aptos Assistant, which is a kind of curated AI chatbot that integrates with the best sources of information for Aptos, keeps it current, up to date. You can ask any questions. You can get amazing answers in terms of learning about the Aptos ecosystem, Aptos design docs, principles, some code snippets, something that you can't get from a generic kind of model from like, say, ChatGPT 4 today. And that we find to be really helpful. We've also seen things like Copilot, where if you're coding and Copilot starts to suggest, it learns on the fly, what does good move code look like? How do I, do completion of this particular line? Or, what are some suggestions in terms of, like, here's an example contract that also does swaps, for example, that you can learn from. Those things also help a developer productivity. And or even over time, how do you inject kind of move prover semantics into my code base and now allow me to provide high quality testing every time I want to run my CI build on this. So that's also really cool. But the next step, of course, is going to be how does blockchain help AI? And we have a partnership with Microsoft. We've been playing around with their co-innovation lab around different kinds of product experiences, which is a lot of fun. Also, we work with them on the Aptos Assistant, given their close relationship with OpenAI. And so in this case, we started to think more about how does content verification and identity work in this space. I think those are kind of the two core problems we want to solve. As you see, more and more content coming up, and we're all wondering: is that content authentic? Has it been doctored? Has it been altered in any way, shape, or form? There's a lot of work to be done in terms of generating kind of proofs that Camilla, you signed this content, and with your signature, you are authenticating that this is you, or you're testing that this is something that you support. Or you're saying that maybe this is something that was edited with Midjourney or something else like that. And so, or also, are you giving permission for this content to be used as a part of training for these large language models? So all these things, I think, are where blockchain starts to really become very important. It is, one of the only ways to prove your identity these days is to sign something. Otherwise, I don't, how do we know you're you and I'm me, even on this call? It could be anybody. So I think those are the things that we start to see as really, really exciting for upcoming use cases of blockchain going forward.
Make your trades go further with Matcha, the DEX aggregator from 0x. Get the best prices on swaps with smart order routing and over 5 million tokens at your fingertips. Tap into more than 120 DEXs at once for the best value in DeFi and trade cross-chain for free across 7 networks. And with Matcha Auto, MEV protection will save you money as your trades settle quicker through private market makers. Trade on Matcha today. Absolutely agree. I think it's really been eye-opening to see the level of development that AI has achieved just in just like very recently, with Sora being the latest example. It's just mind-blowing how much the line between what's real and what's fake, how much that's been blurred. So yeah, I agree that we will need some sort of content verification system that where you can see the provenance and just like verify the provenance and source of each piece of content online. I made a video, like a video essay last week, saying that I think that we'll get to a point where we will only trust content that has this verification system, and we'll assume that everything else is fake, because I think we'll just get to that point. So, and I think that an open source, permissionless system supporting that standard is so needed. So yeah, I do think that those proofs need to be recorded on chain. That's something that's kind of not censorable, not alterable. Will be
exactly. And in order to reach mass adoption, it's got to be extremely cheap. It's got to be very, very scalable, because if you think about it, there are billions of pieces of content generated at, say, one company, one social media company, per year. And that, we have a lot of content being generated on all the social, sites that we produce content on. And even beyond that, now we will even have AIs generating their own content going forward in the future. So it's really, really key for us to build out that scalability, in Aptos to support it. So both, the high transaction throughput rate, very, very low fees, ability for super highly granular clocks that Aptos has. I think also something kind of really unique about Aptos. We record a clock tick every 200 milliseconds or so. And so as you get that stamped, you're getting a very, very fine grain path of content lineage that you can trace back to, especially if you want to talk to an auditor, like, oh no, like this is exactly when this happened. You can kind of see that proof on the Aptos blockchain is something that we think is also a very, very unique value proposition here.
Cool. What do you think about like royalty payments for creators?
I think it makes sense. I think that we've seen that explore in the NFT space to a large degree. Definitely going to require a lot of experimentation. But first and foremost, I mean, having that system where you can support, users being able to specify their preferences in an immutable way, in a way that is provable to everybody. I said, I want this piece of content to not be used for training. And if you do use, or I want this content to be used for training, but I want to be paid for or compensated or receive a benefit. And then being able to also now, the good actors in the system that are going to be like, oh yeah, happy to do that directly on chain, whether it's giving you some points or tokens or whatever it's going to be. That can all happen instantly every time they're used. And it's actually an amazing mechanism for transporting assets around. But going back to the earlier point, it's going to require massive amounts of scale. We have billions of people using social media sites every day. And in order to maybe support that kind of traffic flow of value transfer between the two parties, those who kind of use that data for training, those also are providing that data, it's going to require like massive scalability. And that's something that Aptos is, I think, really well suited for.
Nice. Yeah, I'll be really interested to see, what kind of systems you put forward. And then another recent announcement from you guys was a partnership between the Aptos Foundation and Jambo Technology, a Web3 developer in Africa, for I think a phone.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, super interesting. Like how does that fit into your strategy?
I think it fits in very closely in terms of that point about user experience we talked about. I think there's only two kind of L1s that have kind of integrated phones into their product. One, of course, being the Solana phone, and then the other one being Jambo phone with Aptos. And I think these initiatives are both important. They're very different. The Solana phone is kind of more of a high-end device. The Jambo phone is actually targeted towards emerging markets. It's very inexpensive. It's $99. I ordered one. It was a very easy, simple process, and I think it's much more accessible. This is something where, in order for us to really get in the hands of those 5 billion internet users out there, mobile is so important because 95% of those folks are using a mobile device to access the internet. And so just kind of pushing that further and further into the technology stack where you're using the internet, you're using Web3 in the background, you're getting a great user experience, and it just happens to be something that you now own. It's in a permissionless network. It works just as good as it does on traditional internet, if not better in many ways. Like those are the things that help that mass adoption cycle for us. And so getting involved, having Petra there, which is kind of a wallet for Aptos, and then adding new features over time that allow people to do more things Web3 directly out of the box, I think, and with less clicks, less friction points is going to be a massive game changer for this space. Very
cool. So your thing is like mass adoption, getting billions on chain. Right now, it seems like we're at the beginning of a new bull market. Each bull market brings in a new wave of users. So, what do you think is going to be that killer use case? Maybe it comes from Aptos that will bring in the next, billion users. You're laying the ground for it. It looks like with all your infrastructure, getting Web3 phones in the hands of people. But what do you see these people actually doing? Like, what's the use case?
Yeah, I think going back to kind of our four verticals that we believe are the mass adoption points, you have gaming. And there are a lot of games coming live on Aptos on the next year. Many large partners. We have also retail efforts and partnerships with folks like Lotte, who's the largest retailer in South Korea, who will be doing a lot of experimentation with Aptos in terms of point type systems, as well as even payments over time. And so those are definitely some key things. From the technology standpoint, there's a lot to do. Like, there's getting to mobile devices. There's also something released recently called passkeys. And so passkeys, I think a lot of people are familiar with. They just may not know the technical name for it. But when you kind of store a password in your phone and you secure it with your face recognition, your Face ID, behind the scenes, what's happening is a password is being stored onto your iPhone. It is being backed up into iCloud. And that password is now something you don't need to remember. It is just kind of safe and secured by your iCloud account. And this prevents a much lower, user friction for using any application. And so this kind of core technology of passkeys is integrated into Aptos and something that we expect anyone to be able to build on top of. And so whether it's going to be things like the retail app in Lotte that can allow you to log in and transact in a very seamless way, or it's going to be the massive amount of games coming to Aptos in the next year that are, again, all your transactions are happening behind the scenes, and you're not even aware of it to some degree until you want to be. I would say those are the kind of the things that are going to reach mass adoption. We see the way that real world assets are taking form in many different shapes. Ondo, of course, being one of them, but large asset managers are taking those assets, money market funds, and putting them onto blockchain. And we will see, I think, massive transaction volume from those assets moving from off-chain to on-chain going forward. And AI, of course, is one of those use cases which has a tremendous amount of interest given the mass technology advancements that are happening quickly. And I think those solutions will need to be developed very, very fast and reach a mass audience in the near term. So all these areas are things that we're really excited about. We have, and one thing I didn't talk about much was, even on the AI side, there are a lot of new platforms being built out for doing training in a Web3 world, where Web3 provides kind of the backbone. Like there's a token economy that powers, like if you have some machines, I have some machines, we want to lend them to another person to kind of use that hardware and then get compensated for in terms of tokens. That's where Web3 can help provide that infrastructure, a payment system of sorts, a transaction bartering system that is all recorded on chain, but supports massive AI training across lots of commodity hardware. So those things also can be massive drivers for AI. And so when you look across the board, whether it's going to be AI, gaming, finance, and also the innovations in the technology side to make it super simple, the same way that the internet is for today, whether it's going to be on your browser or your mobile device, we think that's going to really advance that mass adoption story much, much quicker.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'd love to also get your broader view on what the blockchain ecosystem as a whole will look like. What's your view like? Do you think there will be a single layer one to rule them all? Do you see an interconnected world of chains with bridges? Will it be a layer two, like one main layer one with a bunch of layer twos around, or how will the ecosystem be structured?
That's a fantastic question. I think the way I look at inspiration for this mainly is around what happened with cloud. And so if you think about in 2006, Amazon launched AWS, and then there are a bunch of other cloud providers that came up over time. And then today, we have a decent number of cloud players. I think there's there's several, say 5 to 8 kind of very large cloud providers across the world. That seems to be like a very reasonable way in which blockchain settles out. It's not too big, not too large number of networks. And the reason for that, of course, is that, as you transition, even between these clouds, like a lot of people go multi-cloud today. I run some of my infrastructure on AWS. I run some of it on GCP. I run some of it on Azure. I do this because I don't want to be locked into one vendor. I do this also because I may have requirements with certain partners to be operating in different clouds in different regions. I think a lot of those things will be kind of true for blockchain as well. Like there are basically infrastructure service, and they are something that has different properties and different maybe different requirements over time. But today, what we'll see in the short term is an explosion of networks. I think we've seen so many networks launching, especially in the L2 space. I suspect later on, in the longer term, we'll see a contraction of that into like something very similar to the cloud infrastructure, where you have maybe 8 to 10 kind of larger networks that consume most of the traffic.
It makes sense to me as well. Like that, right now, I don't know what the right number is. I think now it seems like there's just too many chains to be practical. But yeah, I don't think that a single chain will be enough for most use cases either. So yeah, I think something like 5 to 10 or something along those lines. The challenge obviously will be to make sure that all these chains are interconnected, that the bridges are safe, that it's not a massive kind of UX pain to move between them. And I think all of those things are kind of being worked on right now.
They're getting better, but I do think that we should probably not underestimate, like even in cloud, like they get better as well. Like it's easier to deploy things on multiple chains. I think things like Kubernetes, like as an interface, like that's common now for how we launch services, makes it simpler. And we'll see those things like through bridges and others, cross-chain messaging protocols that are starting to take off in this space. That being said, I still think, I believe very strongly that a single chain can actually scale out to a very, very large to capture a lot of the traffic out there. I think from a technology perspective, it is possible, and that is something that we at Aptos are committed to searching and developing. And based on our numbers or we see from our early preview nets, we're really excited about that. We can get these numbers to be 10x, 100x. We think there's more than 1 million transactions per second that are possible with enough hardware. And so, our goal will be to keep pushing on those boundaries and do go as far as we can.
So what does success look like for Aptos?
Success for Aptos, I guess can be looked at a couple of different ways. Like ultimately, we want to see users getting value out of the network. And so there's a variety of different ways. There needs to be great apps built on the infrastructure that are being used, where people are having fantastic experiences that are on par or better than what exists inside of Web 2 today. From a technology standpoint, that means it's got to be extremely easy from user experience, as easy, if not easier, than Web 2. We talked about some of those things around the way you log in, the way you custody your funds, the way you transact. Just needs to be very simple and even more secure in some sense than the way Web 2 is today. And then from a system standpoint, we've got to support massive transaction rates at very, very low fees. And we have to be able to build out software that can scale to that and maintain security over time. So that is kind of the core challenge we want to solve. If we can get there, I think we think the world will be just a much better place. It'll be a place where everyone can transact permissionlessly, where anyone who wants to kind of participate in the network can do so in different ways, whether it's holding tokens, whether it's staking, whether it's building on the network. And I think that our ultimate goal is to form an amazing global public utility that helps everyone out there.
What's your kind of holy grail number of transactions per second that you have in mind?
Oh, that's hard to say. I mean, we're shooting for over 1 million transactions per second in the near term, but that probably won't be enough if you want to capture all the database use cases out there in the world. And so it's a good starting point. We can probably get there in a year or two if we want to. Depends on the priorities of definitely what the builders want to see out there. And then that number is also kind of a little bit, just to put a little point on that. I think we do focus on transactions a lot. The type of transaction matters a lot as well. Like some transactions are very, very simple. Maybe just moving a number from my account to yours. There are much more complex transactions as well. And so when we think about that, we really want to think about the kind of other metrics like gas per second, operations per second, that kind of capture more of the workload and the cost of the work that's being done on the chain, and scale that out as far as we can.
Interesting. All right. Okay. So would a broader goal would it be to say that you want to capture all database use cases? I
think we want to capture pretty much, ideally, all internet transfer of assets on chain.
Okay.
That would be probably the broad goal. And of course, we can go beyond that. We can start to move towards non-internet transactions as well, because today there's a lot of cash-based transactions, for example, that are kind of not happening on the internet. Those would be kind of another goal to hit over time.
That's a nice goal.
Yeah.
All right, Avery, thank you so much for joining me again. Super interesting. Loved learning more about Aptos. And yeah, we'll definitely be covering all of the development and progress at the Defiant.
It was great to chat with you as well, Camilla.